Hey everybody, welcome back. It's John Rinehart here with Rinehart Group LLC, and today's episode begins my brand new journey into 3D printing.
Going on an adventure!
I have zilch, nada, zero experience with the topic, but I spent the last 2 weeks gathering as much information from as many sources as I could to put together the complete beginner's guide to 3D printing. And one of the main things that I learned over that 2-week period is that the community of 3D printers that you have surrounding you will make a world of difference for you. So if you're completely new to 3D printing, just like myself, or if you have a ton of experience in the field, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and I'll gladly subscribe right back to you, and let's grow our 3D printing communities together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and crack open the beginner's guide to 3D printing so you can save yourself hours of research and not be publicly ridiculed by strangers on the internet that think they're smarter than you for some reason. I've got my notes here all ready to go. Let's get it. To start things off, the 3D printers that you're going to be interested in will fall into 2 different categories. An FDM, which is a fused deposit modeling 3D printer, or an SLA, which is a stereolithography 3D printer. The fused deposit modeling 3D printer is what you're most commonly used to seeing, where it takes a spool of what's called filament made out of various materials and melts that and then deposits it into specific areas, building your 3D creation. A stereolithography 3D printer, more commonly referred to as a resin 3D printer, that takes a tub of special resin and hits it with UV light, and every time that UV light hits it, your 3D creation gets more and more detailed. And about the only thing that I can think of to reference resin 3D printing is the opening scene to Small Soldiers. Don't know if you've ever seen it, it's a great movie, but this right here is resin printing. Now both categories each have their own accessories, some that you absolutely have to buy, and then there are some that just makes your life a lot easier. So let's start with the fused deposit modeling on what exactly you need as far as accessories go and what just helps out. So for an FDM printer, you're gonna need what's called filament. And the filament are the spools of material that the 3D printer runs through there and then melts, while the 3D printer deposits that melted material in the specified locations, building up your 3D print. I'll go ahead and put a couple links in the description with various filaments that you guys can look at. And that brings me to my second must-have accessory for an FDM 3D printer, which is a nozzle cleaning kit. Your nozzle will become jammed at some point in time, and you're gonna want the kit to be able to clean it and be on the way. And there will be a link in the description for a cleaning kit as well. And that brings me to my last accessory that I want to focus on for an FDM 3D printer, which is a filament dryer. And this is where I found the most conflicting opinions. Some people are going to tell you that you have to have one. Some people are going to tell you that you don't need one at all. And then some people are going to say that you only need one when you're in a humid climate. Well, what is a freaking filament dryer? And the way that I would describe a filament dryer is just an incubator for your filament. It encapsulates your filament and keeps it nice and dry. That way, when the filament is fed into the machine, it doesn't jam the machine up with any type of moisture that's on the filament. My personal opinion on if you need one or not, well, a filament dryer is going to run you anywhere between $50 to $100. And for $100, you can get a really nice filament dryer. And with that $100, what do you get? Well, you're going to get dried filament, but you're also going to get the insurance that you're not having wet filament going into your machine. And you're also getting the peace of mind that your 3D prints are going to get goofed up a lot less. And for me personally, this 3D printing is very complex. I'm very new to this. Anything that I can do to reduce the amount of problems that I have, I'm game. I'll go ahead and spend the $100. But as far as must-have accessories go for an FDM 3D printer, that's pretty much it. As long as you have filament, something to clean the nozzle with, and a filament dryer if you want one, you're pretty much set up to 3D print with an FDM 3D printer. You can take designs straight off the internet. I'll go ahead and put a couple websites that you can pull those designs from in the description. Now, let's take a look at resin printing and the accessories that you're gonna need and the things you're gonna want. First and foremost, you're gonna need some resin. There are quite a few different brands of resin that all come in different colors that you can use to change the color of your creation, but I would recommend that whatever brand of 3D printer that you decide to go with, I would get that brand of resin. And if you need help picking a 3D printer, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because I'm going to do a full video on an unboxing and how exactly I picked my first 3D printer. Now when it comes to resin 3D printing, once you get the print all finished, good to go, you're holding it in your hands, you're about halfway there. Which brings us to our next necessity accessory for a 3D resin printer, which is a wash and cure station. And a wash and cure station is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to take your 3D print and then wash it in a solution that's mostly isopropyl alcohol, and then it needs to cure for about an hour, and then you're good. And for all of my fellow corner cutters out there, you need to do this step. You cannot get away with resin 3D printing without a wash and a cure station. So if you buy a resin 3D printer, you have to buy a wash and a cure station with it as well. And moving on to our next accessory, which isn't actually a necessity, but I have never seen anybody that does this professionally not use some form of heat. And heat, when it comes to 3D resin printing, will do a myriad of things, such as drying excess resin, smoothing out any defect, and then getting rid of any bubbles. And this is another area where you're gonna find some differing opinions. Some people are strictly heat gun, and some people are strictly blowtorch. And the people that are strictly blowtorch say that a heat gun does not have the amount of heat that they need. Now, me personally, I'm probably gonna start off with a heat gun and then just work my way up to the blowtorch. As you get more and more into this, you'll come to find that there's a lot of aftermarket parts that you can buy to modify both an FDM printer and a resin printer. But as far as accessories needed to get you started, that's pretty much it. And this is a prime example of why you should start growing your community of people that 3D print. Because here I am with my Amazon cart filled to the brim with an FDM printer, 2 bottles of resin, and a wash and cure station. I'm ready.
I'm ready.
And then the boys on Reddit were like,
No, you ain't.
so shout out to those guys on Reddit who stopped me dead in my track, got me the information that I needed, and helped me out significantly. And one last little side note, for both printers, it never hurts to have a little bit of rubbing alcohol and sandpaper on hand, just in case you gotta smooth any defects out and then clean it up real quick. Now, obviously, the next question that you're gonna have is, John, which one should I go with? And the answer to that question relies solely on your application. What exactly are you gonna be using this 3D print for? Is this a small, intricate part that's going to fit in a larger system and needs to be down to the millimeter perfect? Or is this a hobby item like a figurine that's gonna sit up on a shelf? Because if this is a hobby item and not an intricate part that needs to be perfect down to the millimeter, I would recommend going with an FDM printer. Fused deposition modeling 3D printers are what the majority of hobbyists tend to go with. And that's because typically they are cheaper and less complicated to operate. Filament is going to cost much less than your washing chemicals and your resin. And you save a ton of time and money by avoiding the wash and cure phase altogether with an FDM printer. But with all of that being said, what you gain with an FDM printer is going to cost you in your 3D print's detail compared to a resin printer. So yeah, an FDM 3D printer is cheaper and less complicated to use, but if you need precision detail, then you're gonna wanna stick with a resin 3D printer. And just to give an example of someone who needs to resin print, there's a gentleman online who resin prints face masks, as in like a full face mask of a character. So not only does the print need to have very unique, precise details, it's also pretty big. So big, in fact, that he has to resin print them in 2 different sections, and then he takes each section, puts them together, puts resin in the crack, and then hits it with UV light until it dries. So that would be an example of someone who definitely needs to resin print. And while we're here talking about both printers, I just want to make one quick side note. As the technology improves for both printers, one thing that's coming with that is the reduction of sound when the machine is in use. So much so that it's turning into a selling point for some of these 3D printing companies that is so quiet you can keep it right in your bedroom. But both an FDM printer and a resin printer each produce carcinogenic fumes. And I don't want cancerous fumes anywhere near my bed, because your bed is like a giant sponge that you just literally roll around on all night. I would recommend a room that you can close off with a door and it has some type of ventilation in it, or at least a window. And the last topic that I want to discuss in this 3D Printer's Beginner's Guide is actually what brought me to 3D printing. So I had an idea to 3D print something that doesn't exist. I would like to get a patent for it, but I don't necessarily want to spread the word about this idea. But how do I create something that I can't just pull off the internet? How do I make my own design for a 3D printer? Well, that process consists of 2 parts, and both parts can be found online for free. I'll put links in the description. The first step is picking a CAD program, which stands for Computer Automated Design. And yet again, this is exactly what it sounds like, where you take your computer and you design your 3D model. And some of the most common resources for CAD programs would be Tinkercad, Onshape, or Fusion 360. And I'll go ahead and put links to all of those in the description. So picking out a CAD program was step number 1. Step number 2 is picking out a slicer program. And a slicer program is going to take your CAD design and then put it into language that your 3D printer can understand and print. And 2 common slicer programs that you can choose from are Cura and Pura Slicer. I'll have links in the description so you can check those out too. And if you don't know anything about these programs or you don't understand how they work at all, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be doing a full walkthrough on each program and how they work. So all of that information that I just gave you is the foundation to 3D printing. If you have any questions, please drop them down in the comments section. I respond so quickly it's not even funny. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. I have a ton of content coming out on 3D printing and how to do it. This is John Rinehart here with Rinehart Group LLC, and I'll see you next time.